Hello, and welcome to another Bleach review. Today, I'll be talking about the most recent episode of the 1000-Year Blood War anime, Gate of the Sun. This episode went places that I did not expect, which is something that I've been really enjoying about this course so far. It's cool how, despite having read the manga, that I can still be surprised and not expect things. It makes talking about these episodes a lot more interesting, and this is another case where I'm really excited to do an episode review, so enough rambling, let's get into the video, and yes, I will be starting at the very beginning. So this episode starts by once again showing the Varvelt castle coming up out of the ground. However, this time, instead of the throne room, it shows the Schutzstaffel and Uryu standing on one of the towers of the castle. And then, there's an overhead shot of the city. The way this overhead shot then turned into this symbol and showed the episode title was really cool to me, by the way. After that, it shows Yhwach in his throne room, telling the Schutzstaffel to show the Soul Reapers who have passed into Varvelt a warm welcome, as he puts it. At first, I thought that he was talking to them telepathically, but it looks more like he told them beforehand in the throne room and they're thinking back on it. They all then transport, I guess, and from there, it's the opening credits. After the opening, we see the Gotei 13, where Shunsui tells the group that the enemy is beckoning them. Before they all get going, though, he has a brief interaction with Basby, where Basby tells him that they're not taking orders from him and that they will part ways here. The Gotei then starts running towards the castle, while Basby, Lil Toto, and Giselle disappear into the shadows. After a brief moment with Ichigo's group, it then cuts back to the Gotei, where Kisuke wonders aloud where Mayuri is. The next scene shows Mayuri leaving the gate with Nemu, and they must be in another part of the city because it does not look like the same spot where the rest of the group were, though I could be wrong, of course. Anyways, while Kurotsuchi is speaking, Kenpachi appears behind him, which leads to a hilarious reaction that is straight from the manga, but somehow funnier here in the anime. The two have a little back and forth while Ikkaku, Yumichika, and Hanataro look on, and then they all start running off in the same direction. I don't have many or really any thoughts about this scene aside from it being kind of funny. Once again, it shows Ichigo's group, and Orihime brings up how it would have been nice to meet up with Rukia and Renji, with Ichigo mentioning that they can't create a foothold or use a soul phone. Nothing really to say about this scene either. It's pretty similar to the one from chapter 629, Gate of the Sun, which is obviously the chapter that this episode is named after. The main difference here is that this kind of funny moment from the manga was cut where we find out that Ichigo did the same thing that Yushiro did in the last episode, and Yoruichi kind of pokes fun at him a bit. This is one of those cases, though, where I don't really care about humor being cut because, to be honest, I like the anime's version more, though admittedly, due to them cutting that, we have no idea how Ichigo even realized that they can't create a foothold, but it's such a minor thing that it doesn't even matter. Anyways, the scene continues, where Grimmjow speaks up and says that catching up with everyone would just slow them down. He also calls this a waste of time and starts running ahead on his own, with Ichigo warning him that someone's ahead, the someone in question being Askin. Askin talks to himself about how having to face Ichigo's group is bad luck for him, and then he basically gets jumped by Grimmjow. I don't know why, but this scene had me laughing. I mean, it's not a particularly funny scene, but just something about Askin's initial reaction before Grimmjow pounces on him kills me. There's a brief moment with Gerard that I don't care enough to comment on, a scene with Basby and the others that I also don't care enough to comment on, aside from the fact that I noticed that they cut a small bit of dialogue from Basby that was in the manga. Here, he mentions that the Gate of the Sun is still functional, the panel showing that he's standing on one. That's not here in the anime, so I obviously don't know if they even used the Gate of the Sun here, though of course they very well may have, it just wasn't shown. From there, it shows Ichigo's group, catching up to Grimmjow, and as he's yelling at Ichigo to back off, Askin comes out of the rubble and starts running. This whole chase is just so funny, and I don't really have any commentary on it besides that. It's just a pretty funny scene. And it's also pretty clever how Askin tricks Grimmjow with the gift ball at the end. I really like that. Oh, and side note, but while I was looking through the manga for this video, I realized that they've once again rearranged things a bit. So in the manga, the Askin and Grimmjow chase starts at chapter 630 and ends at chapter 635. It's not a big deal, but what this means is that they've skipped ahead at least 4 chapters, which is interesting. This tells me that the friend arc that is shown within those skipped chapters is likely not going to happen in the anime until closer to the end of the core, which is fine with me because, to be honest, it'll make more sense that way. But getting back on track, after Grimmjow goes down, it cuts to Lille using his gun to shoot down some of the Shinigami in the group. Poor Shuhei is the first one to go down, followed by Omaeda, Kiyone, Isane, and Sentaro. This scene was brutal. I mean, I knew that Shuhei was going down because that's what happened in the manga, but to see the others go down the way they did was wild. The worst one to me was Kiyone, simply because of where she got hit and the way it lingered for a few seconds after. Now, due to Isane getting hit as well, I'm now wondering how the hell these guys are gonna get healed, because these characters are alive at the end of the series, so there's no way that they're dying here. Right now, I figure that maybe Hanatoro will manage to find them later on and heal them by himself. There's also Rukia, who does know how to heal, but she had to leave them behind, sadly. Of course, she could always come back later, but based on the end of this episode, she'll likely have other things to worry about for the time being. Oh, and speaking of Rukia, on my first watch, I literally yelled at the screen for her to run because I did not want to see her get hit by Lille. I mean, I didn't think that that was going to happen, but I was still worried. But anyways, after that madness, we see Renji. Someone shoots arrows at him from behind, and it turns out that this someone is Uryu. And after eye catches, we get the best part of this episode, and possibly the best fight of the core so far. I'm not going to spend much time on the little back and forth they have beforehand, but I just want to say that Uryu is putting on the performance of a lifetime here. But to talk about the actual fight, this whole thing was just crazy, starting the moment that Renji starts using So'o Zabimaru. Now in the manga, we only really got to see him use this new Bankai once, so it's really nice to see it again. And what makes it even more exciting is that this time we get to see new techniques, all of which were pretty awesome. This fight also does a lot of work to show just how much stronger Renji is now in comparison to before. Like seriously, Renji was straight up throwing Uryu around for this first part of the fight. I mean, he even tried to use Zaga-Teppo, which showed me, at least at first, that Renji, unlike Ichigo, was not pulling his punches. And in all honesty, in terms of a pure fight, that makes this better than the Ichigo fight from episode 30, but I personally still prefer the Ichigo fight, mainly because it was more personal. I mean, yes, Renji and Uryu did fight together in the Urankar arc, but they're not friends the same way Uryu and Ichigo are, so I'm just not as invested in this one, despite really liking both characters. Anyways, after Renji uses Zaga-Teppo, we see that Uryu has Blut vein all over his body. He gets up and once again activates his Volstandig. The first thing that I noticed is that this initial activation only gave him the wings. The little cuff things and all that stuff we saw in episode 30 weren't there, so I was wondering what was going on here, though of course my question got answered in just a little bit. Uryu starts shooting a bunch of arrows at Renji, with him avoiding all of them, though he does end up flying into the air at some point. Uryu then steps forward, only to step on some fur that fell. Renji uses a technique called Hihi Tensho, which causes all of these arms to come up out of the fur, trapping Uryu inside of them. Renji then uses another technique called Zagai Zeko. It creates this fire cyclone of sorts, and I swear this was so cool. I mean, I knew that this wasn't going to kill Uryu, but I don't care because it was awesome to watch. But But here, it cuts away from the fight for a bit. First showing Kinpachi and Mayuri running through the city, and then we see Askin and Grimmjow again. They have a little back and forth, the scene ending when Ichigo shows up. And I can't help but wonder how this is gonna go. Are Ichigo and Grimmjow gonna go up against Askin together, or are we just gonna get Rug Ichigo like in the manga? Right now, I feel like it's gonna be the latter, but the anime could also change it up some by letting Ichigo actually fight Askin for a bit. Anyways, it goes back to Renji vs. Uryu, where it looks like Uryu is down for the count, only for him to use Sklaverai while telling Renji that he hesitated. I found this piece of dialogue interesting because it didn't look to me like Renji was hesitating, but maybe he was and I just couldn't tell. Here, we see Uryu's upgraded Volstandig, and this time it looks the way it did during episode 30, which basically means that he was using a Sklaverai empowered Volstandig in that episode, which is pretty awesome. Uryu uses a technique called Vera Schwinger, which traps Renji inside while Uryu explains that it can extract spiritual pressure from everything that's inside of it, and it does exactly this to Renji. Uryu then sets up a final attack, and it's basically the same one he used against Ichigo. Renji does not go down that easily though. He actually manages to use Hikotu Taiho, which was really cool by the way. However, this does not phase Uryu, and he shoots his arrow, which goes right through Renji's chest. Uryu, continuing to put on his bad guy performance, gives Renji 3 reasons as to why he lost, finishing it off with, "And you are a Soul Reaper that I despise," ending the episode, and what an ending it was. I actually had to spend a few minutes working out what happened here because it was a lot. So first of all, there's no way that Renji is actually dead because, well, he's a major character and is still alive at the end of this arc. Also, even though Uryu isn't as close to Renji as he is Ichigo, he still likes Renji and probably considers him a friend too, so I have a hard time believing that he'd straight up kill him with no remorse. So, there's something up here for sure. Right now, I think that despite how that final shot looked, it's more than likely that that was not a fatal hit and Uryu only managed to put Renji out of commission for a bit. And even if he did hit Renji in a vital spot, well, he does have the antithesis, so it's always likely that he could use it here. I can't help but wonder though, at what point is the mask gonna fall? Will it be like in the manga where he finally tells Ichigo, Orihime, and Chad at the castle? Or could he end up getting confronted by someone like Rukia and that's when the mask falls? I guess we'll see. And that's basically it, but real quick, I want to bring up the end credits for the first time in a while. So this week, for some reason, the visuals went in reverse order, and I can't help but wonder if that was intentional. If it was, I wonder what that's supposed to represent. Now, I have seen many people theorize that it's Uryu using the antithesis, which is one that I really like. Now, I'm not trying to read too much into it myself, because it's also likely that it was just an error, but being completely honest, I hope it was intentional, because that would make things more fun. And last but not least, let's talk a bit about the end poem for this week. This time, it's Mayuri, and he's saying, "There is only you, be your own god." Now, considering that next week's episode is called Baby Hold Your Hand, it's very clear that this will relate to the events of that episode. I feel like this might be him talking to Pranita, though it could also be that he's simply referring to himself. Again, though, we'll see. And that's it for this week's Bleach review. I hope you all enjoyed this one. If you did, that's awesome. But if not, thank you for watching anyways. Have a great rest of your day, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Goodbye.